Hi everyone. Okay, we're down to our last couple lectures, which always makes me sad. You guys have done an amazing job this semester, and I hope you've enjoyed the class. This lecture is going to be relatively short, okay, and it's on the evolution of flight. And then the second lecture is going to be on the evolution of mammals, okay? And by then we'll have covered pretty much everything I wanted us to chat about. So if you have any questions, let me know. Hopefully everything is going well, and I'm always here if you guys need me. So when we start thinking about flight, you got to realize there's a couple different types of flight, okay? One is known as passive, where basically the wind is in control. The other is powered, okay, where the critter is in control. Now with passive, there's a couple different types. One's known as parachuting and the other is known as soaring, okay? And we'll talk about examples of each of those, and then we'll talk about the powered flight as well. Now, passive flight is used by the tiniest of critters. They have to be light enough to be lifted and carried by natural winds or air currents. This will not be me. Anyway, they have to be light enough so they don't suffer damage on the landing too. Critters that do this include tiny insects, baby spiders, frogs' eggs, pollen, spores, and seeds. Now, the thing you have to realize, though, is the entire flight duration, direction, and destination are entirely at the mercy of the wind. Now, if you guys ever want to be curious, by the way, the picture from the bottom left is that of a bunch of baby spiders that are ballooning to their next destination. If anybody here is slightly afraid of spiders, don't watch the video. But if you guys are curious about it, go look it up on YouTube, and it's pretty interesting. So believe it or not, the first land critters to fly were spores that were spewed by fungi, plants, and other small organisms that were protected by a dry, watertight coating instead of the slime that used to help retain water. They then fly as passive floaters in the wind, and by the Ordovician and Devonian, there are many examples of dry spores that could begin to tolerate a range of environments. Now, parachuting is a type of gliding flight in which the flight structures basically slow the fall. Parachuting critters have simple flight structures, and they don't have much control over direction, speed, or height of the flight when you compare those that soar. Parachuting is used for short-range travel from one point to another and used when external air currents are minimal, for example, in forests. Now, soaring is where the flight structures can allow a critter to gain height by exploiting natural air currents. Despite the similarities, the biology behind these is very different, and they likely evolved from very different origins. Soaring is used by flying organisms and can require active flapping to gain height if air currents are absent. A wide range of critters can soar, and they may alternate between soaring and what's known as powered flight or flapping. So when it comes to the evolution of flight, this means lightening and strengthening the entire body. And so this involves evolving flight from a pre-existing structure, maybe, for example, a limb, okay? Flight has strong advantages as far as locomotion goes. This includes escaping, rapid travel, or migration. Flight also has its costs, though, when it comes to energy and body form and function. So relatively large lifting structures need to be present, and likely they would have evolved from an existing structure. In many cases, for example, in birds, they had to give up the arms for their feathers. Now, we've said before that flying insects were found in late Carboniferous. In most living insects, only the last molt has wings, and this is where there's a drastic metamorphosis to get to this stage. So wings have to be light and strong. They're often attained by withdrawing as much live tissue as possible away from them. What is left is a light mass of dead tissue, though, that cannot be repaired. So this usually means a short adult lifespan. Insects are the only critters that evolve flapping flight without sacrificing a limb to form the wings. Ooh, trivia night. Okay. They have lost little of their ability to move on the ground for this particular reason. Dragonflies are awesome, and they're one of the first insects to evolve flight. They have wings that are stable as gliders. However, they use flapping flight to chase rapidly. This is so cool. We actually don't understand dragonfly flight yet. They have two sets of wings. They can be completely out of phase. They can produce lift forces that are 15 to 20 times their body weight. Think about it, guys. These little critters are amazing. Now, insects had what used to be called an excite, and this was initially used as a filtering device or a gill. These are still found in marine arthropods like nymphs. In fossilized nymphs, though, they have more prominent excites that were modified into gills plated gills for swimming, but what was interesting is the plates were also pre-adapted to flight. And the hypothesis is these excites eventually are what turned into insect wings, which is why they're not actually missing much when it comes to moving around on land compared to the critters that had to give up entire limbs, like arms. Now, there are several living vertebrates that dwell in the forest and they have parachuting flight. These include flying squirrels, squirrel gliders, geckos, flying lizards. These likely evolved as vertebrates habitually jumped from branch to branch and tree to tree. None of these guys, though, have powered flight, and the energy that is required for this is gravitational. That's why they fit into this particular parachuting group. The earliest known gliding vertebrate is and I'll spell this for you, Coelurosaurus. Coelurosaurus. That's going to be my guess. And they're found in the late Permian. It has an ordinary small diapsid reptile the size of a small squirrel. The trunk of the body has about 20 or more rod-shaped bones that extend outwards and sideways, and this supports a skin membrane called an airfoil about 1 foot across. The bones are jointed, so this could have been folded along the back when not in use, because remember, they're going to want to protect this when they're not actually using it. Over time, flight evolved and modified in the reptile lineage through the Sarovipteryx. Charovipteryx, who had long, strong limbs with a long tail and large, broad wing surface behind the trunk of the head. So eventually these guys had long, flattened bones and curved tips. The airfoil also was folded, and remember, this wasn't cheap to make. So scientists think that initially this airfoil may have been used more for display than for flying, but later on was just shifted in its use. Now, the pterosaurs are the most famous flying reptiles, and the earliest came from the late Triassic after they were evolved for flight. Pterosaurs have lightly built skeletons with air spaces in their bones. Their forelimbs were extended into long struts that supported a wing. Most of the wing was supported by one long finger, while the 3 other fingers were normal and had claws. The 4th finger was about 10 feet long, by the way, and the largest of the pterosaurs. This is in contrast with birds that support the wing with the entire arm and bats that use all of their fingers. Okay, the largest flying critter to ever evolve was the pterosaur. They flourished for more than 140 million years. Okay, they occupied a variety of niches from the very largest to the very smallest of the vertebrate flyers. They had large eyes and narrow jaws. They often had thin and pointed teeth. Stomach contents preserved in the fossil record always seem to contain fish remains, though some with shorter jaws also ate crustaceans and insects. Despite an extensive fossil record with exquisite preservation in many cases, fossil interpretation can be difficult. Many scientists compare pterosaurs to birds as well as bats to try and gain physiologic information, but really there's no modern comparisons for these guys. Based on bone structure, one thing is clear: they had flapping flight. They likely could not have flapped for long, though, and much of their time was likely spent soaring. However, aerodynamic analysis indicates that pterosaurs were the best slow-speed soarers ever to evolve. Once again, another piece of trivia. Cool. We don't exactly know why pterosaurs became extinct, although it's speculated that they were warm-blooded active animals much like birds. However, unlike birds, they became extinct at the end of the Cretaceous with the dinosaurs. Now, living birds are warm-blooded with efficient thermoregulation. This maintains body temperatures higher than ours, by the way. They breathe more efficiently than mammals. Bet you didn't know that. They have a different lung system than we do, and they have better vision than we do. Okay, birds kind of are awesome. They build extraordinary nests, they create art objects, and some species can make and learn to use tools faster than chimps do. They range from ostriches and penguins that can't fly to hummingbirds who can barely walk. Their bone structure is so similar to dinosaurs, though, that some scientists feel they are nothing more than glorified reptiles. Archaeopteryx is perhaps the most famous fossil in the world. It has a feathered dinosaur, basically, that looks a lot like a bird until you look carefully. Only 11 specimens have been found, and initially they were labeled as a fossil bird. Archaeopteryx has a long, bony tail, clawed fingers, and a jaw full of teeth. Some skull characteristics do resemble birds, and a CT scan of the brain case shows that the brain was bird-like. Interestingly, the Archaeopteryx did not have the bone structure to fly. Likely they were strong and fierce little running predators. Now, initially, many scientists feel that the initial purpose for long feathers that are used in flight today was for display, maybe to ward off competitors and predators while attracting mates. Over time, they feel that wing strokes could have easily transitioned into creating lift and takeoff. However, specific bone structure is needed to sustain active flight, and it would have taken time for this to evolve. New behaviors can evolve relatively quickly, and when evolutionarily advantages can select strongly for them over time, however, the bone structure is going to take a while to actually come around. When the dinosaurs died out, new niches opened up for the birds and the mammals. Birds quickly became dominant land predators and evolved into terrestrial bipeds once more. Now, it has been suggested that some of these flightless birds, such as Gastornis here, were large carnivores. And later on, this has been debated. Others feel that they actually consume seeds. I think it's going to be a while before this debate is actually settled. All I know is I would not want to go back in time and run into one. You can see they're actually quite large and muscular and, nothing to be messed with. However, I like to think of them as carnivores just because it's so much cooler. Now, the latecomers to flapping flight were the vertebrates. No surprise there, we're always fashionably late. In bats, the wing is stretched between the arm, body, and the leg with the fingers splayed out in a fan. The membrane is elastic and must maintain tension to fly. The hind leg is an anchor for the wing, which makes it difficult for the bats to walk or run. That's why they have unusual habits like roosting upside down. Bats are awesome. They use sonar, likely evolved from acute hearing and shifting into echolocating sonar for insect hunting, fishing, and frog eating. It's been suggested that bats never glided or parachuted, but instead used legs to jump in the air. This is based on bone structure and modern behavior. However, given all this information, flight provides a unique opportunity for all kingdoms, and as evolution took over and they radiated into these niches, the usefulness of this mechanism is easily seen today.